The morning sun cast long shadows across the settlement of New Eden, a small human colony on the outer rim of known space. Children's laughter echoed through the streets as they played between the modest buildings, their voices mixing with the hum of atmospheric processors and the distant rumble of mining equipment. Sarah Chen, 8 years old with bright eyes and pigtails, chased a butterfly through the community garden, her small feet patting softly on the packed earth. The Zephyrian fleet arrived without warning. Their ships, sleek and predatory, descended from the cloudless sky like metallic vultures. The first sign of trouble was when the butterfly Sarah had been chasing suddenly fell dead, its delicate wings crumpling as the alien ship's energy fields disrupted all local wildlife. The little girl looked up, confusion replacing joy on her innocent face. Captain Marcus Wright was in the colony's command center when the proximity alarms screamed to life. The screens showed 12 Zephyrian cruisers in perfect formation, their biometallic hulls gleaming with an oily iridescence. He had heard stories about the Zephyrians, whispered tales of their ruthless expansion across the galaxy. They were known for their cold efficiency and their complete disregard for what they considered lesser species. "All civilians to the shelters immediately," Marcus ordered, his voice steady despite the ice forming in his stomach. "Send a distress signal to Earth Command. Tell them we have a code black situation." But the Zephyrians moved faster than anyone anticipated. Their technology was centuries ahead of human capabilities, their weapons designed for swift, overwhelming destruction. The first energy pulse struck the colony's power grid, plunging half of New Eden into darkness. Emergency lights flickered on, casting everything in an eerie red glow. Sarah's mother, Dr. Elena Chen, ran through the streets calling for her daughter. The evacuation sirens wailed overhead, mixing with the increasing whine of Zephyrian weapons charging. She found Sarah standing in the garden, still staring up at the alien ships with wide, fearless eyes. "Mommy, what are those pretty lights?" Sarah asked, pointing at the energy weapons that were now carving through buildings like they were made of paper. Elena scooped up her daughter and ran toward the nearest shelter, but they were too late. A Zephyrian landing craft descended directly in front of them, its landing thrusters scorching the earth black. The craft's door opened with a hydraulic hiss, and 3 Zephyrian soldiers emerged. The Zephyrians stood nearly 8 feet tall, their exoskeletons a disturbing blend of organic chitin and technological enhancement. Their faces were hidden behind biomechanical masks that pulsed with internal light, and their movements were precise, almost mechanical. They carried weapons that hummed with barely contained energy, devices that could reduce a human to ash in seconds. "Please," Elena begged, holding Sarah tighter. "She's just a child. Take me, but let her go." The lead Zephyrian tilted its head, studying them with sensors that glowed like cold stars. When it spoke, its voice was a harmonious blend of mechanical precision and alien intonation, translated through a universal communicator. Child, adult. These distinctions are irrelevant to the hegemony. This world now belongs to us. You are obstacles to be removed. Elena tried to shield Sarah with her body, but the Zephyrian's weapon was already charging. The energy beam struck them both, and in an instant, mother and daughter were gone, reduced to nothing more than scattered atoms and a scorch mark on the ground where they had stood. The massacre of New Eden was swift and methodical. The Zephyrians moved through the colony like a surgical instrument, eliminating every human they encountered. Men, women, elderly, children, none were spared. The aliens showed no emotion, no hesitation, no mercy. To them, humans were simply an infestation to be cleansed from a world they desired. Captain Wright made his last stand in the command center, transmitting everything he could to Earth Command before a Zephyrian beam reduced him to ash. His final message was simple but haunting. "They killed everyone, even the children, even little Sarah Chen. God help us all." The Zephyrians completed their work in less than 4 hours. New Eden, which had been home to 3,000 souls that morning, was now a smoking ruin populated only by alien soldiers. They began immediately setting up their own structures, biomechanical constructs that rose from the ground like metallic tumors. Commander Thexval, the Zephyrian fleet leader, stood in what had once been the colony's central plaza. Around him, his soldiers worked with mechanical precision, erecting the foundations of a new Zephyrian outpost. The smell of burned human flesh still lingered in the air, but Thexval paid it no mind. To him, it was simply the smell of progress. "Status report," he commanded, his voice carrying the authority of one who had overseen dozens of such cleanings. "All human life forms eliminated," his lieutenant reported. "Planetary resources confirmed suitable for hegemony expansion. Estimated time to full conversion, 14 standard cycles." Thexval nodded with satisfaction. "Excellent. Transmit success confirmation to the Hegemony Council. New Eden is now Colony Designation Zeph 447. As the Zephyrian ships settled into permanent positions around the planet, none of them considered the possibility that their massacre might have consequences. In their long history of expansion, they had eliminated countless species across hundreds of worlds. Humans, in their estimation, were just another primitive race that would disappear into the cosmic dust of forgotten civilizations. They had no way of knowing that every human life was connected to a vast network of family, friends, and fellow citizens who would grieve their loss. They could not comprehend the human capacity for righteous fury or the lengths to which humanity would go to avenge their dead. Most critically, they failed to understand that in killing Sarah Chen and the other innocents of New Eden, they had just made the worst mistake in their species' long history. The distress signal from New Eden reached Earth 3 days later, traveling through quantum relay stations across the vast distances of space. When the recording of Captain Wright's final transmission played in the halls of the Human Defense Command, the silence that followed was deafening. Admiral Rebecca Morrison, the highest-ranking officer in human military forces, watched the recording 3 times before she spoke. "Gather the fleet admirals," she said quietly. "All of them. And contact every human colony, every orbital station, every ship in space. It's time they learned what happens when someone hurts our children." The message that went out across human space was simple. They touched our young. Now they answer to all of us. In the depths of space, massive human warships began to change course, their destinations now set for the Zephyrian holdings. The largest military mobilization in human history was beginning, and at its heart was the memory of a little girl chasing butterflies, and the mother who died trying to protect her. The Zephyrians had no idea what was coming for them. They had made the fatal error of believing that humans were just another species to be swept aside in their march across the galaxy. Soon, they would learn the truth about humanity's greatest strength. When you threaten their children, every human becomes your enemy, and they will follow you to the ends of the universe to make you pay. Admiral Rebecca Morrison stood before the largest gathering of human military leadership in history. The great assembly hall of Luna Station buzzed with tension as representatives from every corner of human space took their seats. Fleet commanders, marine generals, intelligence directors, and civilian leaders filled the massive amphitheater. Above them, holographic displays showed the positions of every human warship in known space. Hundreds of vessels beginning to converge like iron filings drawn to a magnet. 3 days ago, Morrison began, her voice carrying clearly through the hall's acoustic systems, the Zephyrian hegemony committed an act of genocide against the colony of New Eden. They murdered 3,000 human beings, including children as young as 4 years old. They did this not in war, not in self-defense, but simply because they wanted our world. The hall erupted in angry murmurs, but Morrison raised her hand for silence. Behind her, The main display showed footage recovered from New Eden's surveillance systems, images of Zephyrian soldiers calmly executing fleeing civilians, of children being gunned down as they ran for shelter. The room fell deadly silent as they watched Sarah Chen's final moments. Sarah Chen, Morrison continued, her voice thick with controlled rage. 8 years old. She died protecting her mother, trying to shield her with her tiny body. Her last words were, "Don't hurt my mommy." Morrison paused, letting the weight of those words settle over the assembly. The Zephyrians have ruled this galaxy through terror for over 1,000 years. They believe fear makes them untouchable. Today we teach them about human fear. Today, we show them what it means to threaten our children. Fleet Admiral Chen Zhao, Sarah's grandfather and commander of the Pacific Fleet, stood slowly from his seat. His weathered face was a mask of barely controlled fury, his hands clenched into fists. "Admiral Morrison," he said, his voice steady despite the storm raging behind his eyes, "I request permission to lead the vanguard assault." "Granted," Morrison replied without hesitation. "Admiral Zhao, you'll command Strike Group Alpha. Your target is Zeph 447, formerly known as New Eden. I want every Zephyrian installation on that planet turned to glass." Across human space, the machinery of war began to move with frightening efficiency. The massive shipyards of Mars worked around the clock, their automated systems producing ammunition and weapons at unprecedented rates. The orbital defense platforms that protected Earth began moving into assault formations, their crews preparing for the largest military operation in human history. Dr. Elizabeth Vance, Director of Weapons Research, stood in her laboratory on Europa, surrounded by her team of scientists and engineers. They had been working for 72 hours straight, fueled by coffee, stimulants, and burning rage. Before them sat the prototype of humanity's newest weapon, a quantum disruptor array capable of tearing apart Zephyrian biometal at the molecular level. "How long until we can mount these on our ships?" asked Commander Torres, the military liaison. 6 days, Dr. Vance replied, her eyes bloodshot but determined. "We'll have enough units to equip the entire fleet in 6 days. The Zephyrians think their technology makes them invincible. We're going to prove them wrong." Meanwhile, in the shadows between star systems, human intelligence operatives moved with deadly purpose. Agent Rebecca Klaus piloted her stealth ship through the outer reaches of Zephyrian space, her sensors mapping enemy positions and defenses. Her ship's AI cataloged every Zephyrian installation, every fleet movement, every weakness in their supposedly impregnable empire. "Base, this is Shadow 7, she transmitted through encrypted quantum channels. "I'm seeing massive Zephyrian fleet movements. They're pulling ships from all over their territory, concentrating them in the Kepler sector. Whatever they're planning, it's big." Back on Luna Station, Admiral Morrison studied the intelligence reports with growing concern. The Zephyrians weren't just sitting idle after their massacre. They were mobilizing their own forces, preparing for what they clearly saw as an inevitable human response. "They know we're coming," said General Harrison, commander of the Space Marines. "This won't be a surprise attack." "Good," Morrison replied coldly. "I want them to see us coming. I want them to have time to think about what they've done, to understand the magnitude of their mistake. Fear is a teacher, General, and the Zephyrians are about to learn the hardest lesson of their lives." The human fleet began its assembly in the Titan system, far from Zephyrian sensors but close enough to strike quickly when the time came. Ship after ship arrived through quantum jump gates, massive dreadnoughts bristling with weapons, nimble destroyers designed for fast strikes, carrier ships packed with fighter craft and marines. The assembled firepower represented the combined military might of every human world, station, and settlement. Captain Maria Santos stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Terra's Fury, watching as more ships dropped out of quantum space around them. She had served in the human fleet for 20 years, had seen action against pirates and raiders, but nothing had prepared her for this. The sheer scale of the gathering armada was breathtaking and terrifying. "Captain," her communications officer called out, "we're receiving a general transmission from Admiral Morrison. She's addressing the entire fleet." Morrison's image appeared on screens throughout the massive fleet. Behind her stood the flags of every human world, colony, and station. Her uniform bore the insignia of Earth Defense Command, but she spoke for all of humanity. "Citizens of Earth, Mars, Luna, Europa, Titan, and every human settlement among the stars," she began. "Today we stand united as we have never been before. The Zephyrian hegemony believes they can murder our children and face no consequences. They believe their superior technology and ancient empire make them untouchable. They are about to learn how wrong they are." Morrison paused, her gaze seeming to look directly at each viewer. "For 3,000 years, the Zephyrians have spread across this galaxy like a plague, destroying civilizations and enslaving worlds. Hundreds of species have fallen before their advance. But they made one critical error. They underestimated the human spirit. They underestimated what happens when you threaten our families, our children, our future." The transmission showed footage of the gathering fleet, thousands of ships from across human space, all converging on a single purpose. "We are not just going to war," Morrison continued. "We are delivering justice. We are sending a message that will echo across the galaxy for 1,000 years. Humanity protects its own, and we never forget those who harm our children." On the Zephyrian homeworld of Nexus Prime, High Commander Vex Thul received reports of the human fleet buildup with something approaching amusement. The massive Zephyrian stood in his command chamber, his biomechanical armor gleaming under the artificial lights. Around him, holographic displays showed the movements of human ships, their primitive vessels crawling through space like insects. "Fascinating," Vex Thul mused to his subordinates. "The humans actually believe they can challenge the hegemony. Their emotional response to the cleansing of that insignificant colony shows exactly why they are unfit to inherit the galaxy." His lieutenant, Commander Drexall, expressed concern. "High Commander, our intelligence suggests the humans have developed new weapons technology. Perhaps we should exercise caution." Vex Thul's mandibles clicked in what passed for Zephyrian laughter. "Caution? Against a species that barely mastered faster than light travel 2 centuries ago? No, Commander. We will crush this human fleet, and then we will cleanse every human world in the galaxy. They will serve as an example to other species who might dare to oppose the hegemony." But as reports continued to arrive about the size and scope of human military mobilization, some in the Zephyrian command began to question their leader's confidence. Never before had they faced an enemy willing to commit their entire civilization to a single conflict. The humans weren't just sending a fleet, they were sending everything they had. Deep in the human fleet's formation, Admiral Chen Zhao stood in the ready room of his flagship, the Righteous Vengeance, holding a small photograph of his granddaughter Sarah. The picture showed her on her 7th birthday, laughing as she blew out candles on a cake shaped like a butterfly. His hands trembled slightly as he touched the frame. "Grandpa will make them pay, little butterfly," he whispered. "I promise you that." Around him, his officers prepared for the largest naval battle in galactic history. But for Chen Zhao, this wasn't about strategy or tactics or even victory. This was about a little girl who would never chase another butterfly, and the price that would be paid for her murder. The stage was set. 2 civilizations, each convinced of their righteousness, prepared to clash in a conflict that would reshape the galaxy. The Zephyrians had technology, experience, and the confidence of 1,000 victories behind them. But humanity had something the ancient empire had never encountered before: the unified fury of an entire species protecting their children. In the depths of space, the 2 fleets began their final approach toward each other. carrying with them the hopes and fears of billions. The galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see which force would prove stronger, the cold efficiency of an ancient empire or the burning rage of a species that had just learned the true meaning of war. The Battle of Kepler's Gate began at 0347 hours, Galactic Standard Time, when Admiral Chen Zhao's Vanguard fleet dropped out of quantum space barely 2 light minutes from the Zephyrian defensive line. The alien fleet was massive, over 800 ships arranged in perfect geometric formations, their biomechanical hulls pulsing with internal energy. For a moment, space hung silent between the two forces. "All ships, this is Admiral Zhao." The old man's voice carried across the communication channels, steady and implacable. "Remember why we're here. Remember Sarah Chen. Remember New Eden. No quarter asked, none given. For humanity." The response came back from 1,000 ships, 1,000 captains, 1,000 crews united in purpose. For humanity. The Zephyrians fired first, as they always did. Their particle beam arrays lit up space with deadly energy, lancing out toward the human fleet with surgical precision. But the human ships didn't scatter or retreat as expected. Instead, they accelerated directly into the enemy fire, their new quantum shields flaring as they deflected weapons that should have torn them apart. Captain Maria Santos felt the Terra's fury shudder under enemy fire, but her ship held together. Around her, the quantum disruptor arrays hummed to life, Dr. Vance's miraculous weapons preparing to deliver humanity's answer to Zephyrian superiority. "Target their flagship," Santos ordered. "Show them what human engineering can do when we're truly motivated." The first quantum disruptor beam struck the Zephyrian command ship like a sword of pure destruction. The alien vessel's biometal armor, which had been considered impenetrable for centuries, simply dissolved at the molecular level. Secondary explosions rippled along the ship's hull as its own systems turned against it, the disrupted biometal causing cascade failures throughout the vessel. High Commander Vex Thul felt his ship die around him, and for the first time in his long life, he experienced something the Zephyrians had bred out of their society generations ago: fear. The humans had done the impossible. They had created weapons that could destroy Zephyrian technology as easily as crushing an insect. "Impossible," he breathed, watching his fleet's formations crumble under the human assault. "Our intelligence said they were centuries behind us. How are they doing this?" His surviving Lieutenant Commander Drexel worked frantically at his control station. "Sir, we're losing ships faster than we can track. Their weapons are unlike anything in our databases. And sir, they're not taking any prisoners. They're destroying every ship completely." Across the battlefield, the truth of Drexel's words became horrifyingly clear. The human fleet fought with a ferocity the galaxy had never seen. When Zephyrian ships tried to surrender, their surrender signals were ignored. When escape pods launched from dying vessels, human fighters hunted them down and destroyed them. This wasn't war, as the Zephyrians understood it. This was extermination. Admiral Morrison watched the battle unfold from her command ship, her face carved from stone. When her communications officer reported that several Zephyrian vessels were trying to surrender, she didn't hesitate. "Signal the fleet," she said coldly. "The order stands. No prisoners, no survivors, no mercy. They showed none to our children. They deserve none from us." Agent Rebecca Klaus, now flying in a stealth fighter among the chaos, targeted fleeing Zephyrian vessels with methodical precision. Each ship she destroyed brought her one step closer to avenging the innocents of New Eden. Her weapon systems were synchronized with her heartbeat, each pulse representing another Zephyrian who would never again threaten human children. But the real shock came when the human fleet reached the former New Eden system. Admiral Zhao's task force dropped out of quantum space to find the planet completely transformed. Where once there had been rolling hills and forests, Now there were only Zephyrian biomechanical structures rising like metallic cancer from the surface. The aliens had not just murdered the colonists, they had erased every trace of human presence. "Sir," his sensor officer reported, voice tight with emotion, "I'm detecting Zephyrian life signs across the entire planet. Approximately 50,000 aliens now occupy the colony site." Admiral Zhao stared at the planet where his granddaughter had died, where her laughter had once echoed through gardens that no longer existed. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute judgment. "Sterilize the planet," he ordered. "Every structure, every installation, every living thing. Turn it all to ash." "Sir," his executive officer protested, "that's 50,000 sentient beings. The Galactic Accords." "The Galactic Accords died with Sarah Chen," Zhao cut him off. "They wanted this planet so badly they murdered children for it. Let them have it. Let them burn with it." The bombardment of New Eden lasted 6 hours. Human dreadnoughts rained nuclear fire down from orbit, while quantum disruptors tore apart the alien installations at the molecular level. When it was over, the planet's surface was a sheet of glass, lifeless and sterile under the pitiless stars. Not a single Zephyrian survived. News of the human victories spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Species that had cowered under Zephyrian rule for millennia watched in amazement as the ancient empire's fleets were systematically destroyed. The humans fought not just with superior technology, but with a ruthless determination that shocked even hardened warriors. The Altarian ambassador to the Galactic Council transmitted an urgent message to his homeworld. "The humans have done something unprecedented. They have united their entire species around the death of a single child. Every human ship, every human soldier, every human world has joined this war. They call it justice, but what I am witnessing can only be described as the wrath of an entire civilization." On the Zephyrian homeworld of Nexus Prime, panic began to set in as reports arrived of one defeat after another. Entire sectors that had been under Zephyrian control for centuries were falling to human forces. The biomechanical cities that covered the planet's surface buzzed with desperate activity as the ruling council tried to comprehend how their empire was crumbling. High Counselor Zex Morth, eldest of the Zephyrian leaders, studied the tactical displays with growing horror. "How many fleets have we lost?" 47% of our total naval strength," his aide reported. "And the humans show no signs of slowing their advance. Sir, they're not trying to conquer our territory. They're trying to eliminate us entirely." For the first time in Zephyrian history, the ruling council considered something that had been unthinkable for 1,000 years: surrender. But when they tried to open negotiations, their envoys were destroyed before they could deliver their messages. The humans, it seemed, were not interested in surrender. They wanted only extinction. Dr. Elizabeth Vance stood in her laboratory on Europa, now converted into a massive weapons production facility. Around her, automated systems produced quantum disruptors by the thousands, each one calibrated to destroy Zephyrian biometal with perfect efficiency. But she wasn't thinking about the technical specifications of her weapons. She was thinking about the footage she had seen of Sarah Chen's murder and the promise she had made to the little girl's memory. "How many more can we build?" asked Commander Torres. "As many as we need," Vance replied without looking up from her work. "We're not stopping until every Zephyrian ship in the galaxy is scrap metal." The final battle came at Nexus Prime itself. The human fleet, now grown to over 3,000 ships as reinforcements arrived from every corner of human space, surrounded the Zephyrian homeworld like an iron noose. The planet's orbital defenses, considered impregnable for centuries, lasted less than 2 hours under the human assault. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching as Zephyrian cities burned on the planet below. The aliens had ruled the galaxy through fear for so long they had forgotten what it was like to be afraid. Now, as their civilization crumbled around them, they were learning. "Admiral," her communications officer reported. "We're receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian High Council. They're requesting terms for surrender." Morrison didn't even pause. No terms. No surrender. No mercy. The bombardment of Nexus Prime lasted 3 days. When it was over, the Zephyrian homeworld was a dead rock floating in space, its biomechanical cities reduced to radioactive slag. The empire that had dominated the galaxy for a millennium was gone, erased as completely as they had tried to erase New Eden. In the aftermath, as human ships patrolled the ruins of Zephyrian space, Admiral Chen Zhao stood alone in his quarters, holding the photograph of his granddaughter. The war was over, but the cost weighed heavily on his soul. They had committed genocide to avenge genocide, destroyed an entire civilization to honor a single child. "Was it worth it, little butterfly?" he whispered to the picture. "Did Grandpa do the right thing?" Outside his window, the stars looked different now. Humanity had proven itself capable of becoming the very monster they had fought against. But perhaps that was the price of protecting innocence. Sometimes you had to sacrifice your own innocence to preserve it in others. The galaxy would remember the Zephyrian War for millennia to come. It would be told as a cautionary tale about the dangers of threatening humanity's young, about the price of underestimating a species' capacity for both love and vengeance. Children across 1,000 worlds would learn the story of Sarah Chen, the little girl whose death brought down an empire. But Admiral Chen Zhao would remember it differently. He would remember it as the day humanity looked into the abyss of total war and found it looking back. They had won, but in winning, they had become something they had never been before, a species to be feared as much as respected. As he set the photograph down and prepared to return home, Chen Zhao made a silent promise to his granddaughter's memory. Humanity would remember this lesson. They would remember what they were capable of when pushed to the edge. And they would make sure that never again would any species make the mistake of thinking human children were acceptable casualties in their wars of conquest. The galaxy had learned a new truth. Touch a human child, and you faced not just humanity's military might, but their unified soul. Cross that line, and you don't just fight their ships, you fight their entire civilization, their history, their future, and their absolute refusal to let evil triumph over innocence. The Zephyrian hegemony was gone, reduced to atoms and ash. But their legacy lived on as a warning written in the cold language of destroyed worlds and empty star systems. Here lies a species that learned too late what it means to threaten humanity's young,